Hello, welcome to the Trainer's Digest. I am one of your hosts, Joseph Fine.
And I'm Nate.
This is our fourth episode of the Trainer's Digest, and we had a really great episode last week, actually, with Katia. I feel like Katia definitely. I feel like Katia was more apt to that kind of environment than we even were, Nate. It's kind of funny. I feel like she's did very well.
He's comfy.
As you know, yeah, she's very comfortable, and her answers were very concise and very well thought out. So I mean, I really enjoyed what Katia had to say. So
Yeah, it was a good time. I don't know. I think it's nice to be able to bring other people in just because I don't know. I mean, honestly, like I feel like a better than average trainer. Like I think that I'm a pretty decent trainer, but I don't know. You add another 10 years experience on top of what I have, and it's like, okay, yeah, no matter what, you're gonna get some great insights and stuff like that. So
yeah, exactly.
it was fun.
And yeah, and I feel like she was also just a really good person to have for our first guest speaker. She really set the tone, and she set a really high standard for our next guests that we have on our show. So what was one thing, Nate, real quick, that really stood out to you? If there was one thing that you took away from something that Katia mentioned or had to say, what do you think that would be? Just to kind of recap on, in case somebody didn't get to listen to it or doesn't want to, listen to the previous episodes, because
don't want to sift through everything. Yeah, so I mean, I would say the big thing for me was I really liked her talk about shifting passions changing as time goes on. Because I mean, and this is kind of a thing that applies to all of life, but you're gonna have one thing that you really, really stick with and you really like. But that doesn't necessarily mean that 3 or 4 years down the line that you're gonna be that same person and that what you're super, super set on is gonna be the thing that you're continuing to be passionate about later on. And so kind of adapting to that passion and embracing it rather than kind of painting yourself into a corner because you're that kind of person. I think that was kind of a huge takeaway for me. I thought that was pretty cool, and you could probably tell during the episode because I was kind of I was flipping out a little bit.
mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely agree. That was really great insight, and that was the first time I feel like I've heard something like that, which is,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, surprising because, I mean, granted, I haven't been in this industry for a long time per se, but I feel like I've been in it long enough to have heard some pretty influential things, and that was definitely very new for me to hear. Just her take on that, and it was super helpful and insightful. So, excuse me. I would say I was thinking the exact same thing that you were thinking as far as the topic that stood out to me most. I feel like a lot of people struggle with feeling like they have a place, within the fitness industry. And if they start out doing something and they realize they're proficient, then they are very hesitant to move on to something, as she puts it, when their passion shifts, following their passion, because they're so comfortable and at that point confident in their ability to do what they're doing, that it can be kind of daunting to shift from something you've done for a while to something new, something brand new.
Yeah.
But that's how you're going to get fulfillment. Honestly, if as long as you just keep following your passion, you'll continue to get fulfillment. If you keep doing something that you don't enjoy anymore as much, just because you're too scared to move on, then the fulfillment just won't be there as much as it could be. So I think that was very, very helpful insight, and among the many things she had to say. And if you guys want to hear more about what Katia had to say, go ahead and listen to episode 3. It was a great episode, probably one of our best ones yet. to be
That's a good
completely
one.
honest. But and then I have Katia's info if you want to know more about who Katia is and things like that in that in that episode description. Some of her like her Instagram, her gym website, things like that. But other than that, today we did also want to talk about YouTube comments and people participating in the episodes. So, we've said in previous episodes, episode 1, episode 2, if you have questions, if you have comments, you have things you want us to talk about, drop them in the comments. And we've had feedback, which is awesome. And it's exactly what we're hoping to get. We want to talk specifically about one comment and that the question that they had, and that's going to be more or less the theme of our lesson, or sorry, our episode. Lesson for me, episode for you guys. So in YouTube, I'm gonna go ahead and read. So the comment talks a little bit about the episode, but then at the second half of the comment is the initial question. And it says, one thing I'm curious about is a trainer's role in nutrition. As a trainer, I'm sure you guys have worked with people of all shapes and sizes with goals like losing weight, burning fat, or building muscle. Do you help your clients make nutritional plans to help them with their goals? What's this process like? Nate, I'm going to give you the floor first for this question. First things that come to your mind, first thing, most important thing you think needs to be covered within this question.
Yeah.
What do you think it
So
is?
yeah, so honestly, I think that nutrition is one of those things that is kind of a little bit misunderstood from a training perspective. Just because whether you're just jumping into training for the first little bit as like a trainer, or if you're just working out and you're just trying to kind of learn a little bit more about what's all out there. The thing is that there's a lot of both stigma and also a lot of just, emotionally charged feelings that come around when you start thinking about nutrition a little bit, because it's not super, super difficult to get a good workout in, like it's not super hard to push yourself to the point where it's really hard. But there's one thing that I feel like most people in the industry, whether in or out as trainers or not, feel, and that's just kind of a lack of confidence when it comes to nutrition. Now, one of the things that I think that is really important as a trainer to remember is that you're not a licensed nutritionist. And so a lot of the time when you're looking at unless you've gone to school for that, you've gotten your license and everything to practice as a nutritionist, you shouldn't be writing out an exact minute by minute plan for things. But by that same token, I think that your job is also to be adaptable. And your job is to help people where they're at. And I think what it really, really comes down to is starting off identifying what you need to know about nutrition. And I guess coming back to kind of some of our previous episodes, your why for the nutrition. Because everything that I've ever kind of thought about when it came to nutrition with different clients, I was able to really break down into two categories. And typically those two categories, they would intermingle, but it was always a question of either, do you have the emotional side of eating figured out? So that means, do you have eating orders eating disorders understood and recognized, or do you recognize an unhealthy relationship with food? Do you use food as a reward? Do you use food as a de-stressor, as a coping mechanism? All those kinds of things. And then addressing that side of things. So that's one whole category that we could spend all day on. And then
guys, expect this to be like a 2, maybe even 3-part episode, because
yeah, we might
nutrition is
jump
a
into this.
pretty broad, subject,
Yeah.
pretty in depth.
Yeah, and then the other half of things is kind of more the clerical side of managing the numbers. And so that means, okay, like getting enough protein in, getting enough fat in, getting enough carbs in, all that kind of stuff. But also making sure that you got the right amount of I guess basically understanding what your DEE is, with your daily energy expenditure, like how much you're burning each day, and kind of how to adapt to that. And so typically when I'm like jumping into like a nutritional situation like that, my first thought is, okay, like let's ask a bunch of questions, let's figure out what's going on and what you need to know, because I think that a lot of the time people aren't going to tell you right on the first, like off, right off the bat,
Hmm.
like I mean, I would say, I think that the general understanding is that most of the time when someone comes in and you're helping someone put together some kind of diet plan or some kind of nutrition, thought process, one of the biggest things is that you don't want to necessarily like say everything that you're telling them they need to follow as if it was a law, because you don't have the credentials to do that. But that being said, I would say that there's been a lot of times when people have come in and they've had so many questions, and they'd be like, okay, what should I eat um, each day? Because they like literally like they have no clue. Like there was a client that I had that would, you know, I, she ate like nothing all day, and she was like, "That's
Hmm.
good, right?" Like, and I'm like, "No, that's like 400 calories. No, like you need to
Yeah.
eat some food." Like, and
Yeah.
I would say that so I don't know. I guess to kind of break it down a little bit, um, I'm kind of curious. How about this? I want to like pretend for a second that like I'm a client that comes in, and let's say I'm a girl that doesn't want to get too bulky, doesn't want to get too bulky, but I
Hmm.
also want a toned athletic look or something like that. And let's say I come into the gym and I talk to you, and I say, "Hey Joe, like on top of the exercises that you're going to help me kind of take care of, like what kinds of things should I be eating to make sure that I don't get too bulky, but also get like a nice athletic look? Like what would you say, and kind of where would you start?"
Well, I always start with what they are eating. Obviously, you need an idea of what their diet is already like. Um, what I always tell people, one thing I'll probably tell every single person, regardless of what it is that they want, that they want to be as balanced as possible with their meal planning or with the foods that they're putting into their system. So a lot of people have a tendency to put in too much of one food group versus, not enough of another food group. And when I mention food groups, I'm talking dairies, meats, veggies, grains, the complete spectrum of what your body should be intaking. Because I always use the example of your body being a machine, and that machine has mechanisms and things that need to be maintenance properly, and they need certain things to help them to function at their most efficient. And our bodies need certain minerals and certain nutrients to function at its most efficient. And so I would just say, looking at your meal and seeing how balanced it is, because the more balanced you are, the better your body's going to be able to burn fat, build muscle, to think properly. The more energy you're going to have throughout the day, the better you're just going to feel in general. And so, and then caloric intake, obviously is a huge thing. Probably one of the most important, things to consider when, you're looking at gaining or versus losing weight. You need to be considering your caloric intake, how many calories you're putting in versus what Nate mentioned earlier, the daily energy expenditure. It's a good idea to have an idea of what your daily energy expenditure is. That can be kind of hard to figure out for some people, a lot of people. Generally, if you go to like choosemyplate.gov, you can take like a test and they'll give you a pretty rough estimate of the amount of calories you need to be intaking per day. There are also body composition testings like the one that Nate and I had at our gym that, we would have people use. It told you what your base metabolic rate is, how many calories you burn, just to exist. And so, if this client is wanting to build muscle, obviously you're wanting to, have a little bit of a higher caloric intake. Now, if they're wanting to make sure they're toning, they're not putting on a ton of fat, then that's when you're looking more at the types of, the sources for that calorie, right? So making sure it's balanced, but also trying to cut out, really high fat things. And a pretty easy one for people to follow without getting too in depth, is just refined sugar. There was a point where I was trying to cut out refined sugar for, and I managed to cut out refined sugar for, the better part of, a year and a half. And so that really helped me, and that's helped, clients in the past to be able to, cut down on some of that fat. Um, but do you have anything to add to that, Nate?
Yeah, so I guess what I want to kind of share is just kind of my process when someone first comes into the gym to talk to me about nutrition. Because one of the things that I think is a big, um, just kind of like a big thing is that essentially people are looking for reassurance when they come in to ask you about nutrition. Because the thing is that most people can have a real good idea of right where like their exercise is going to put them. I mean, at least a pretty decent idea, you know. Like if like a good example is like if someone wants to build their legs and their butt like and their glutes are just like on fire, they can barely walk the next day, they'll know that like the workouts that you're putting them through are going to work, you know. But it's really hard to tell if like what you're eating is going to help you shred the kind of weight that you want as fast as you want it to, um, or help you build. And so typically my first step is just to kind of ask why someone is asking about nutrition in the first place, because sometimes people just, I would say the biggest thing is that people need the reassurance to know that whatever they're doing is working. Um, and so like, for instance, yeah, I'll kind of get a real good idea, a real good estimate of like, okay, this is what you're doing each day, each week. Um, let's see how many calories we're roughly eating each day. Kind of where does that put us? And then from there, I usually like to talk a little bit about, um, I mean, a little bit of the numbers game. So, I mean, to kind of get into the raw nitty gritty, it's okay. Every time you get calories in, calories out, I mean, you're going to be doing okay. There's a lot of different methods of doing that. There's keto, there's like paleo, there's fasted cardio. There's all kinds of different things you can do. But they all revolve around the same principle, which is if you're trying to build muscle, you're typically going to be doing, you know, taking more calories in than you can burn off. And if you're trying to cut, you're trying to consume less calories in. Now, typically what that means in my like in kind of my sensibility, like how I kind of approach it with people to kind of break it down, is I'll just say, hey, listen, let's figure out what your basal metabolic rate is. Let's figure out, okay, like basically, what is your um, like what you burn every day without doing anything at all if you were just lying down all day. And then from there, it's like, okay, let's calculate your activity levels. If you're maybe sitting at an office or you're doing much, maybe you're burning an additional 200 to 300 calories a day. And let's say you're doing something a little bit more active. You could be burning as much as 500 or 600 a day. And then if you add on top of that your workout, then you can kind of calculate out, give them kind of a ballpark estimate of it's like, okay, if you're doing all these things together each day, then this is about how many calories you're burning. Now, once you kind of have that estimate in like kind of out there, typically I'll kind of ask people a little bit more about their goals and how fast they want to accomplish them. Um, because I think at the end of the day, you'd never want to throw someone into something that's super aggressive, um, unless they're super desperate to get something done quickly. I would say that like 95% of the time you should be working with clientele, um, where you're trying to help them maintain a certain lifestyle, of eating habits, not necessarily like a, hey, in 6 months or in 3 months you're going to weigh this much and then you're not going to have to worry about this workout thing. And uh, um, and I think that kind of plays a little bit into all the rest of everything. You want to um, find things, workouts, diets, not necessarily diets, I don't like using the word diets, but um, like ways of eating, ways of working out, ways of kind of engaging your body in such a way where you can feel the immediate benefit of it, and feel like satisfaction out of what you're doing. Um, because if it sucks, you're not going to want to do it for 3 months or 6 months or however long it takes for you to get the actual results. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that trainers make, um, is that, we love kicking our clients' butts. We love, throwing stuff at them that they're like, man, this is the freaking worst. Because like we kind of thrive on that a little bit. Like
Hmm.
we really do. We thrive on that. Like, oh, it
You
sucks.
feel
Yeah,
like you did a good job if they're,
yeah.
in a little bit of pain.
Yeah, and you feel like you're really getting the most out of them. And for some people that's really great. They're masochists. They love the pain, Um but as in the same thing with like exercises, the same thing with just your general programming, and also the same thing with nutrition. You need to find stuff that people are going to enjoy. And if you're working out yourself, you can't you can't take on a fasted I'm gonna fast every day up until 6 p.m. or I'm gonna I'm gonna only eat bacon for the entire rest of the day, or like you can't do anything super extreme and
Especially
expect your
when you're
body to
just
be okay
starting
with that.
out,
Exactly.
right?
You
You
need to
can't,
find something you enjoy.
there's no cold turkey when it comes to nutrition. You're going to burn out in a few days. You have to, I always tell people you start small, right? Little things. Don't go from eating whatever you want, to intermittent fasting on the daily, just like, you mentioned. So I definitely
Yeah.
agree with that.
Oh yeah, and I would just say to finish that last thing that I was saying, um, once you have all the calories that they're burning each day, give them anywhere between like a 200 and 500 deficit or like increase on that number. And that's usually about all you need to know nutrition wise, all you really need to do nutrition wise. Um, yeah, for 95% of the clients. There will be some
Yeah.
people that are doing some crazy stuff, and honestly that's usually when you consult someone else or you consult your own past experience on the matter, whatever that is.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great process, as a trainer. That seems very effective to me. To just kind of put it short, as a trainer, you mainly what you're doing is you're trying to help them to figure out what's best going to help them to adhere, to nutrition. That's kind of your role, as well as educating them on proper nutrition. We mentioned earlier, well, Nate mentioned earlier that we're not qualified unless you did the proper training. You're not qualified as a trainer to give them very, very specific prescribed meal plans, right? So education and assistance with adherence is kind of the main meat of what you can do as a trainer, educating them on proper foods to eat, food groups, tips and tricks. You did mention, Nate, diets, fad diets like Atkins. Well, you didn't say Atkins, but keto, things like that. What's your opinion on those types of diets versus just, watching what you eat, to kind of put it simply?
I think about it the same way I think about CrossFit. In that some of those things can be done really, really well, um, and they can work really well for some people. Um, but I also think that they have a lot of potential to really mess up and to really cause a lot more damage than good. So specifically with some of the more extreme, like the stuff that are really on kind of the fringes of things, I won't name names, but I will just say that like anything that's really extreme, anything that has you fasting for longer than just a couple hours at a time, um, anything that has you cutting out major food groups, um, yeah, actually anything. That was actually one of the very first things that they told me in nutrition 101. Basically, when I first walked into college, they PhD holding professor basically walks in and says, okay, first of all, if any diet tells you to cut out any major food group, then throw it out the window. It's garbage.
Right.
And I would just say that anything that is extreme that falls into that kind of category of eliminating things, crazy amounts of fasting, crazy portions, anything that like anything that's just really weird and doesn't is not super like intuitive is almost always going to be wrong. And the reason, honestly, I think that a lot of that stuff kind of comes up is because I think that diets like to kind of exploit the uncertainty and the nervousness, the lack of assurance of knowing that what you're doing is right, because you want to kind of reinvent eating a little bit. You know, humans have been able to do this for millions of years, or thousands of years. You know, we've got this figured out. Eating is a thing, and we enjoy
And
it,
we love it.
and we love it, and it's great. But like, there's not, it's not like we did this right for 10,000 years, and then some brilliant guy came along and decided that if you only eat bacon all day, that you're going to lose a bunch of weight. Like,
If
it's
only, man.
throw that out there, like throw that out the window. It makes no sense. And honestly, like, it goes the same with like a lot of things that will also, like, I mean, really really extremes, even just in terms of like, oh hey, like you should only eat like this specific kind of thing. Now I think what this will kind of get us into a little bit, at least if you don't stop me, is that kind of the idea that there is, so there's a numbers side of this that we've kind of been talking about a little bit. There's this, okay, let's calculate, like, make sure you got a pretty good ratio of macros. Let's go ahead and get you a pretty good, energy in versus energy out, whatever. Like that's kind of the basic, I don't know, gist of what you need to know for your very early on stuff. If you're doing something super crazy, then go crazy with it. But then there's an intuitive side of things, and I think that the intuition of eating is just as important, if not much more, than the number side of things. And I think a lot of people really have a lot of trouble trusting in their intuition of their diet, because if you let your thoughts and what you feel like eating really really dictate everything that you do, then you can go out of control, and you can, like, if you have eating problems, like if you like really really feel like you need to, like, if you use food as like a coping mechanism, then you can go overboard. But I think that the intuitive side of eating is actually a very underrated and very important aspect of your nutrition that shouldn't be neglected. And my favorite example to use for this is for FitCon. When I did FitCon and stuff like that, Joe always really likes to talk about it. I don't as
I
much,
love to
but
talk about it.
but one of the biggest things that I will like to bring up is that, when I was getting ready for the cut, so I was like, I'm at a certain amount of weight. I'm at, I weigh this much and I want to shred down 10 or 15 pounds. I figured out a ballpark estimate, numbers wise, what I needed to do. And then I ate intuitively off of that for like 4 months. And I was able to shred down to where I wanted to be.
Remind us the general range from where you were to where you got by competition day.
I mean, it was probably somewhere from about 17% down to about 5% or something like that. It was pretty
Incredible.
shred.
Incredible.
But the reason that I was able to do that is because I was in tune with my body and what it needed. My favorite, like, it's just like, if you think about like a pregnant lady, she gets cravings. Her body says, "Hey, you really, really need this right now." And sometimes it's just your body going just crazy. Like sometimes your body's just like, "I want ice cream right now." But then there's other times when it'll be like a really strange, like not an indulgence. It'll be like, my mom always, when my mom once talked about really, really, really wanting celery for some reason. She was just like, I just really, really want celery right now. It's not, and then she ate it and she was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what my body needed. And I wouldn't say that necessarily we had the same levels of pregnancy cravings and stuff like that in our own bodies. But I do think that there are certain levels of kind of intuition, and kind of messages that your body will be sending you subtly that you can pay attention to and kind of feed into a little bit and use as an opportunity to kind of give your body what it needs for when you're trying to do something crazy with it. I don't know. I'm kind of curious if you have any input on that. Sorry, there's a long rant, but
No, that was good. Lot to take away. I just real quick, Nate, you're gonna hate me for this, but I want to share a photo that Nate just sent me today.
Oh no.
This is. I think I could share my screen. I'm gonna do a screen share real quick, and then I want everyone to see. I said in the first episode, I was like, I will show Nate's FitCon picture. Mock my words, and so I'm gonna try that right now. I think I'm. I wonder if does that work? You see that?
There it is. Yeah.
Is it just the photo?
I can see the photo.
You can?
I can see it. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. So I mean, there it is. There it is, folks. That was the result of Nate being in tune with his body and just basically listening to his body, right? Giving it what it needed at the time. One thing I did want to touch on, and this kind of correlates with fad diets like keto and paleo, Atkins. Just like Nate said, if used right, those things can be beneficial, pretty beneficial. But they are not long-term fixes. So, Nate, would you have been able to keep up the same diet to maintain that body fat percentage for more than a few weeks?
No. And honestly, like I think that the diet that I had for the cut, well, here's the thing. I think that the cut diet was actually very sustainable. I could have stayed on that cut diet for a while. But I don't think that the stuff leading right up to the event I would have been able to maintain. Because I mean, yeah, I kept it going for about 4 months, and I was steadily losing weight. I was definitely not like from, I don't know,
So that's probably an
from
example of
normal.
the right way to do it, rather than here's a bad example of how to do it in wrestling, for anybody who wrestled, and this isn't just something that wrestlers know. Anybody who knows a wrestler knows that the way they cut weight is much less than ideal. You're going through really intense and extreme, modes of trying to, lose that last pound, half a pound, just to even that last ounce. You're trying to, it's all water weight more or less, you in between water weight, fasting for long periods of time combined with intense exercise. I loved the sport of wrestling, but it wasn't until my senior year that I discovered, rather than, an unhealthy mode of losing weight by fasting for super long periods of times while exercising super intensely, trying to, work out for 2-3 hours in a 90+ degree room. I discovered healthy eating, watching what I eat, and I lost weight a lot slower, but I had much more energy, to be able to compete on, the day of a wrestling meet. And just, I functioned better, throughout, my, throughout school, other sports, other activities that I had. And so, taking time can go a long way, right? With losing weight and with, trying to get to where you want to be, not trying to rush into it. That's why, we said earlier, this isn't a cold cut turkey type of thing. You can't sustain a cold cut, not for a very long time, at least. And a lot of these diets kind of emphasize that quick, result, right? Like keto, for example. Basically, what you're cutting out with keto is carbs, and carbs hold a lot of water weight. And so what you're cutting out essentially is water weight. Now, a few weeks down the road, you've lost 3, 4, 5 pounds, and you decide, okay, I'm going to start, slowly reintroducing carbs back into my diet. Well, what happens to that weight, that water weight? It just comes back, right? And so that's kind of why things like keto aren't really sustainable, is because you cut out a certain food group, and then you just eventually you bring it back in because you miss bread or you miss, whatever. You want to start taking it in, even if it's little by little. That weight is just going to come right back. And Nate mentioned, just like CrossFit, there are ways to do it where it can be pretty beneficial. I would say, as an example, you get someone who has 30-40% body fat and they do keto for a while, they lose a lot of visceral body fat. And if they were to do keto for a few weeks, a month, 2 months, shed some of that visceral body fat, and then transition, instead of transitioning to slowly putting carbs back into their diet, transitioning to more of a balanced diet and making sure they get all the right food groups, portion control, managing their calories, that will make that result that they've gained more sustainable and long term. And then, they don't have to continue to be on keto to have the results that they want, because I like carbs. Everyone loves carbs, right? And so, no one wants to have to cut out carbs. But that's kind of my take on the fad diet type of concept.
Well, and so I mean, I don't know if for those of you listening along, you might be noticing kind of a common theme among all this, which is basically if you can only take one thing away from what we're saying today, whether as a trainer or someone that's just normally working out, sustainability is always better than quick results, and it is always more
Amen.
important to have a it's always more important to have a like marginally good diet that you can keep up for 6 months than a really really good diet that you can only keep going for a couple weeks. um, you will always make more progress with a diet that you can sustain than one that you can't. And so if you can't sustain it, throw it out the window, start over with something new, start off with something that's really similar to what you're doing with a slight adjustment to a couple things. Don't tie yourself to something that is terrible and awful
Mm-hmm.
and all those things.
Don't be
And
miserable, right?
don't be
Don't make
miserable, make
yourself
it
miserable. You
fun.
don't have to.
It's absolutely not worth it. um like I don't know, I just think too many people treat their nutrition and their workouts like they treat homework from school. And even then, maybe you should think about homework a different way too, but it's they see it as a necessary evil that you have to just kind of put up with to get what you want. And honestly, like, I can speak from personal experience in saying that, like, that mentality does not hold up. It can for a while. I will say that. Like, there will be some times when you can say, oh, hey, like, I'll just put up with this, or I'll keep my unhealthy coping mechanisms and channel that negative energy to make something try and like nice and positive, or whatever. But like positive reinforcement, positive energy, positive whatever you want to call it. Like if it's something you enjoy, you're going to be able to do it for a heck of a lot longer than something that you freaking hate. And like I would say that like that's probably the most important aspect of training and like nutrition and all those things. Like it's really like it's very very underappreciated sometimes, because of how often we all kind of get into that mindset. It's just like, or maybe it's like work sometimes, sometimes it's just a job you have to go to and you just like hate it or hate certain parts of it, and you just have to come home, but you just like, I have to put bread on the table, I have to get this done if I want what I want, so I'm going to put up with it. But man, no, don't turn your fitness into that. It's not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, better to try and enjoy the journey, right?
Yeah.
And there are ways to make it more enjoyable. Um, it just comes down to finding the right sources, not necessarily just doing what everyone else is doing. Um, there's a good, better, best way to do it, and there's also a right and wrong way to do it. And so, uh, it can be difficult to find that right way and that best way, when you have to sift through all this new popular stuff. But as far as because Nate's mentioned things like sifting through the crap to get to the gold. As far as nutrition's concerned, I've always been directed, and I mentioned this in a previous episode, I've always been directed to, as far as helping people to find good sources, government sources, choosemyplate.gov, place, sources that are backed by research, by FDA. Is that FDA, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Things like that. Or, finding professional help with a registered dietitian, someone who has gotten the right proper training.
Or talking to your doctor.
Talking to your doctor. Perfect. Yeah. Doctors don't, they aren't limited to just treating injury and illness. They know enough about the body to be able to give you, the nutritional advice, and maybe they'll give you something simple like what I would give. And that for a lot of people, that's all they need, right? It doesn't have to be super complex. They just need something simple. Like, well, how is are your meals balanced? Are you making sure you get your proteins, your dairies, your veggies, your fruits? And that can make the biggest difference for a lot of people. Or, what's your caloric intake like? Are you consuming way more calories than you are burning? Things like that. Nutrition is oftentimes way overthought. It's way overthought, and it just needs to be simplified for most people. And I feel like trainers help a lot with that. That's kind of, I feel like that's one of the biggest things I've been able to contribute to clients is just simplifying nutrition, making it seem a little less daunting, putting it in perspective that, hey, you don't have to be like following a specific diet to a T if you're just trying to, over a long period of time, just trying to look and feel better. If you're trying to accomplish something like a FitCon, competition, then yeah, you might need something a little more precise to be able to get to where you want to be by competition day. But unless you're like competing in physique competitions, bodybuilding competitions, it's usually much, much, much more simple than people understand. And a lot of times it comes down to caloric intake, balanced meals, things like that.
Oh, and it's also closer to that than you'd think with, bodybuilding and those kinds of things as well. The nutrition's actually pretty similar, except for like the highest levels. But no, I would just say it's kind of the simplest rule to kind of follow is that if it feels good, it probably is good. Don't, yeah.
Which doesn't necessarily mean pack on donuts because it feels good. Right?
Yeah, but like if your body feels good with what you're doing, then you're probably doing something right. Um, like I'm much more of the opinion that you should eat what feels natural and eat what feels like it's going to be good and wholesome for you. Lots of fruits and vegetables, cutting down on lots of unnecessary like simplified sugars and or simple sugars and lots of like real greasy fats, cutting down on those kinds of things, and then just like if you feel like you're not losing weight while maintaining a diet like that, then go out and just like do a little bit, like add an extra 15 minutes of running on top of whatever you're doing or whatever, um, or like add a nightly walk at the end of the day, anything like that that'll kind of allow you to promote like wellness and like feeling good rather than slaving over the last minute detail to make sure that whatever you're doing is going to get you the results you want,
Right. And anything is better than nothing as far as helping and contributing to that feeling better, looking better, feeling like you're progressing. Nate mentioned adding a little walk, to something. That's a very small, thing that can make a big difference over time. If you just you add a walk, yeah, then eventually you add a brisk walk, then eventually you add a jog, then it turns into a longer jog and it turns into a run. It's all about progression. You don't have to make these humongous leaps and strides to get to where you want to be. A lot of times it's all about doing little by little. And that is a more sustainable way to get you to where you want to be and help you to feel and look your best.
Yeah.
So it looks like we're just about out of time. So that was, perfect way to end this little part of this episode. Just like we mentioned, this nutrition is going to be something we're going to revisit in the future for sure. There are so many concepts with nutrition that, we wish we could cover in the amount of time that we have, but unfortunately we cannot.
Yeah.
And hopefully at some point in the future, we'll have somebody on, a guest who is also pretty well versed in things like eating disorders, or, a little bit more in depth with nutrition and, things that
Mental
might
side of
help
things.
you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and I know you guys are probably getting sick of hearing us plug, but write down your comments and your thoughts and tell us what you want to know, because
please.
we, especially with nutrition, where you like most people need a lot of reassurance in knowing that they're doing something right. Like we can be those kinds of guys to be able to tell you what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
And we can tell you if something is maybe okay. We can give you whatever it is. Like honestly, like we love talking about this if it's not already super apparent in our apparently much too long time for each podcast episode.
Yeah. And even you guys can help as well with commenting on things that you've done that have helped you to feel good, look your best, as far as things that have helped you to be able to adhere to some kind of nutritional plan that you've made or developed or been following. We'd like to hear about those, and then we can incorporate those into our episodes as well. We wouldn't have this. We definitely would have been talking about nutrition at some point or another. We wouldn't have been able to cover it in the way that we have without the comment that we got. And so that definitely, the comment, we thank you, he who commented on, that video, who asked this question, it set the foundation for how we were going to present this episode, this discussion. And so you can have more of those as you are commenting, giving us feedback, leaving your questions. It helps us so much. And we want to hear from you guys. And we are, the point of our podcast is to try and help people. And there's no way, just like with any client that we have had as far as in-person training, online training, we can't help them if we don't know, what they're struggling with, what questions they have. And so, we need to know what you guys want to hear, if we're going to help you guys. So, or else other than that, you're just going to hear us talk about whatever we want to talk about. So, which has a pretty wide range of concepts and subjects. So,
Like
it could be
Cyberpunk
anything.
2077. No, just kidding.
That's right. That's right. That's right. The how hard it is to get the PlayStation 5. I was kidding.
I know, right?
But yeah, so again, we're grateful for you guys and the feedback, and we are on Apple Podcasts now. As of earlier this week, we have the 3 episodes that we have recorded are on there, and this episode will be on hopefully by Wednesday. It will be on YouTube by Wednesday. And we're working on other formats for, the podcast, other services. So we have Apple Podcast, and then there's one called sounder.fm. And I will have both of those links in the description. And you guys will be able to have, the option now to, more effectively listen to us, ramble when you're driving or working or walking or whatever. And so you won't have to be streaming YouTube while you're doing those things. You won't have to look at our ugly mugs. I'm just kidding. Nate's beautiful, so you guys want to look at him.
No, let's be honest. I'm only growing out this beard to try and look more like Joe. So
I don't know, Nate. You pulled it off pretty well. But any last comments, Nate, before we peace out?
No, just keep it real, everybody, and like seriously, like if you enjoy the food, do it right. Like eat it. No. What am I saying? If it feels good, then it probably is good.
There we
and
go.
And yeah, don't overcomplicate it.
That might be the episode thumbnail. If it feels good, it is good.
But at the risk of getting demonetized before we even make money.
Yeah. Not that we're doing this to make money, but I mean, it would be
No.
cool, you know?
But
So,
yeah,
all right. Perfect.
those are my last 2 cents.
I appreciate it. All right, guys. We will definitely be seeing you again next week. Same time. This is the Trainer's Digest. My name is Joseph Fine,
I'm Nate Clark.
and we will see you next week.
See you guys.
Bye.